Yes, have a seat. Relax. Dwight, I forgot that you could actually be so funny. I want to thank all the speakers tonight. I want to thank Dwight for that beautiful introduction and for being much shorter than I could ever be. I remember the night that Dwight Ball became the Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador, and he asked me to introduce him. And I think the people in the room were afraid that the Lieutenant Governor was going to call him for the swearing in before I got him called up to the stage. So I want to thank Kathy for being here, for being the first woman to break that glass ceiling, to become the first female Premier in Newfoundland and Labrador. And by leading by example. People often think that as adversaries in the House of Assembly or in the House of Commons, or because we choose to run for one party or another, that all of a sudden we don't have or build relationships. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. And I think you've witnessed it tonight. There are many relationships built across the floors of Parliament buildings because people go there for one reason, and that is to serve the ones who sent them. And in order to do that, you have to have strong working relationships. I want to thank Kathy for being here tonight and for the support she's shown me as a woman, even after she stepped back from politics and led a much quieter, more civil life. She certainly was there to encourage, support, and always say, I think the last message she sent me back some time ago was said, Yvonne, I watch what you do and I know you're not done yet. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking to myself, that's pretty scary right now, so. But thank you. I want to say thank you to Sheila for being here, for the great stories she told, and we talked a lot about municipal governments over the years and women in municipal governments. And I came into the room tonight and I ran into so many women I have known through municipal governments over the years in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I want to thank you for your service and thank all of those who continue to serve. And I know that one of the hardest things to do sometimes is municipal politics, because you're called when the dog gets loose next door, or somebody ran into someone's wood pile, or someone dumped gravel in the other guy's driveway. You know, you're almost like refereeing sometimes. It's a tough business, municipal politics, I'm telling you. So keep that in mind. My good friend, Jo Marie. Oh gosh, what can I say about this woman? Thank God she was a nurse before she was a politician, because I tell you, she saved me many days through my political career. She not only was my good best friend, that doesn't sound very English, but it's good. You were my good best friend. But she was always there, and never more than when I battled cancer. And the support she showed me at that time, and to this day, continues to be one of my strongest friends. And for that, I will always be grateful to her, a magnificent woman. Thank you, Premier, for coming. I know the House of Assembly is sitting tonight, and a lot of your colleagues could not be here, but I appreciate you taking the time to come, for your very kind words, and for supporting women in politics. And I hope that we can continue to rise women up in the House of Assembly and in the House of Commons. I want to acknowledge all my political colleagues that are out there this evening. I want to especially point out my two colleagues that are here from the House of Commons, Goody Hutchings and Seamus O'Regan. And like the House of Assembly, we're in session as well. So Joanne could not be here, or Ken, or Cherence, or Clifford, but we are a team. And regardless of the stripe that we walk into the House of Commons with, We are there for Newfoundland and Labrador first, and we will never forget that. These two individuals are here tonight, and over the last few years, them and our colleagues, we went through a lot. We've had to deliver big for Newfoundland and Labrador, as the Premier knows. And if he wasn't keeping our feet to the fire, Dave Brazel was keeping his feet to the fire. So either way, it was back on us. But you know, we've did great work together as a team, and we did it with the support of all people in this province. And that's why we have been successful in Newfoundland and Labrador, because whoever we send, we put our shoulder to the wheel and we support them. Because we know if we don't, we are the ones who's going to suffer at the end of the day. And we are not about to suffer, are we? So we work together to make that difference. I also want to acknowledge all my colleagues that are here from the House of Assembly. I can't point all of them out directly, but I want to say to Lisa Dimster, who I work with every day, talk to every day, and we're like partners in something that's not a crime. But it's a tough job, and it's good to have that camaraderie and support. To Jordan Brown, to Perry Trimper, who's a dear friend to me, and to Leela Evans. I work with 4 of those individuals every single day, regardless of political stripe, regardless of gender, regardless of culture, because the same people sent us to do a job. And first and foremost, we respect what they say. I'm so happy that you guys are all here tonight. My thanks for the prayers of Elder Mary Pia Benowin for starting our dinner in a good way. Where the spirit in all of us was lifted, Mary Pia, thank you so much for being here. This woman is the first Inuit nurse in Labrador and have served the community of Sheshatshiu for 40 years. I want to acknowledge Chief Eugene Hart, President Todd Russell, who was also the former Member of Parliament for Labrador, and Nunatsiavut just went through an election, but I welcome the members that are here from the Nunatsiavut government. It means a lot to me to have all of the Indigenous groups in Labrador represented in the room tonight. They have been tremendous, strong leaders, leading at a difficult time over many decades, but always standing tall for their people, and I am so proud of them. So, I'm still on the first page of my speech. But not to worry, I only have 24 pages. But no kidding. I started out with 24. I got it down to about 12 now, and we'll see how it's going to go. But I haven't moved past the first one yet, so let's see how that works out. You all know of Harry Martin. Harry Martin would say, as he looked out from the edge of where he stood, "I have no silver or gold, but I am far richer by the visions that I hold. In this province, a vision of kind people, loving communities, the vision of beautiful, vast lands that extend right to the core of who we are as Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. It is that view on the edge of where we stand that makes us strong, rich, and proud people, proud of our cultures. I want to thank Equal Voice for lifting women up in politics, for their relentless support and encouragement, and for bringing together movements like the Daughter of the Vote. And some of them are in this room tonight. We not only marked the 100th anniversary of women elected in Canada, and I'm so proud to celebrate each and every woman who stood to be nominated and who advanced to the ballot. For they changed the view, they turned the tides, and they created a more balanced narrative, and for that, we are all richer. Tonight, I also want to thank Equal Voice for recognizing my 25th anniversary of being elected provincially and federally in serving the people of Newfoundland and Labrador and the people of Canada. I thank all of you who are in this room for being here. So many of you have been a part of this journey with me over the last quarter century, and many others that could not be here tonight but have been so important in that journey. The only thing I don't understand is why you all spent money to come listen to me after listening to me for 25 years. But of course, we're celebrating and advancing women through 100 years. And today, and in the last few days, I guess, I've been reflecting on that. The emotions that I felt that first election. And you know, they were very strong emotions, and they stayed with me. In fact, they probably served me very well many times along the way. And one was being extremely proud of the people who elected me, and that remains with me today. The other was fear of what I did not yet know. It lingered in the pit of my stomach, and I'm sure you all know what that's like. The fear of not measuring up, the fear of being under a microscope, saying or doing the wrong thing, the fear of being judged every single day. And then there was stubbornness. The stubbornness of conviction that could only be genetically hatched in a province like Newfoundland and Labrador. So I strongly remember these three things very vividly because I knew there were people counting on me. People had stepped up in Cartwright, Lansa-Clare, and in Labrador to elect a woman for the first time, and a woman of 27 years old, in a job that was reserved for middle-aged, graying men. Combine that with the fact that I came from a rural outport community, I grew up in an isolated region, I had practiced a traditional way of life, I was anything but the typical politician. I also knew that they didn't elect me because they loved me. They elected me in spite of the government. And that's how I ended up there. So therefore, they were expecting something greater. And of course, I had helped build that expectation. I'm really good at that, by the way. It's one thing to convince yourself that you could do something, but when you start convincing other people that you can do it, that's dangerous ground to thread for a politician, let me tell you. But I knew I had a responsibility to deliver, and I knew that time wasn't going to be on my side, and I would be judged much more harshly than my male predecessors. So a few weeks after I was elected, I found out that I was pregnant. And I was so excited. I was so happy. At this point, I had been married for 5 years, and at that time, I had no success in fertility. I felt like my prayers had been answered. And I know there are so many women in this room who understand that feeling. And I kept that wonderful news to myself, that wonderful joy, for fear of being judged as a woman in political life. I was listening every day at that point to my critics saying, "Oh, very good, we elected a woman. Oh, very good, she's an independent. She'll be put in a corner. You will never hear from her again. She'll be so far back in the House of Assembly, you'll never hear her voice again. She won't be allowed to say anything." The wonderful news that I wanted to share with the whole world and couldn't because I knew it would just add to the chaos that was already happening around me as a woman who had been elected for the first time. You have to remember it was the reality of the time in which I was living. And at the time, it was the thought that had consumed me. So I told no one. And it was months later that I prematurely delivered my daughter, and sadly, she did not survive. So along with the grief and the tears that I suffered on that day, my mother, my family, all my closest friends, and those that I loved in my life found out for the first time that I was carrying a child and that my baby had died. I realized that I had allowed the views of society to define my thinking. I did not allow those I loved to share in the joy of my life for fear of perception as a woman in elected office. I had omitted to trust the people I loved the most for fear of society's attitudes. So I celebrated alone through remarkable joy, and I struggled alone through a difficult pregnancy when I could have been supported by remarkable individuals. It was a pivotal moment for me as a young woman in politics to realize that if I was to hide behind a cloud of perception, I would do so at sacrifice to myself. So I decided that my perspective would not be shaped by the attitudes that prevailed, but by the attitudes that were possible. This is the first time I have ever shared this story publicly. My daughter would have turned 26 this year. And for her, I have lifted young women and worked to give them equal opportunities in society. There are many young women in this room tonight that I have known since they were young children, and are still very much a part of my life. Fast forward to today, where we have Charlene Johnson, the first woman MHA to have a baby girl while in politics. Sarah Studley, to have her son and bring in new regulations to help moms who wanted to run in elected office. We have change tables in the House of Commons and family spaces. I want to shout out to all those women that have proven that politics and family does work, and it was never one or the other. I absolutely have grown on the floor of the House of Assembly. I had tough competition, didn't I, Premier? But I've not only grown on the floor of the House of Assembly and on the floor of the House of Commons, but I've grown at kitchen tables, boardrooms, classrooms, community centers. And our contributions, at every single phase are never measured as being greater or lesser. Never view your contributions in that way. but they're really measured in the thoughts that you have gathered from listening and learning at that particular time in your life. The most impressive of them all was, and still is for me, common sense. Anyone who knows me will know that. I just love common sense people. I believe that common sense is the best academia that you can bring to any table in any situation. Now, it takes a lot of other things behind it as well, but it's important. Many of the people here talked about tonight me growing up in a small, isolated community. You know, I grew up at a time when planes were landing on sea ice, frozen sea ice with skis over the winter, and in the summer we would get a coastal boat for a few months out of the year. Our connections to the world were very limited. But it was from that tiny community that I learned the greatest lessons of my life. The lessons that would prepare me for everything that would come after. I grew up in a place and time where you were forced to be innovative, where you were forced to think outside the box, where your struggles were yours to fix, and where challenges came like birthdays. There was a different one every single day. It was in that environment that you learn quickly to create your own path forward and to rise to face the moment that you were in and find the solution. So needless to say, I had a really good background for politics. When I showed up in St. John's and first got elected in 1996, before I could take that first walk up the steps of Confederation Building, you know what I had to do? I had to actually go buy myself a suit and a raglan. You remember the raglan? Well, they were all the rage then. Everybody in St. John's had a raglan. So I went out and I got myself a raglan, and my gosh, I didn't have much time. The media was coming. Fred Hutton now was working with NTV. And he showed up with his camera and his microphone, or so many other people with him. And I was there in my sage green raglan. And I really didn't like it, but it was the only one I could find that fit me at the time. I ended up wearing it for 2 years before I could find another one, but I was so happy when I got rid of it. But let me tell you, when I walked up the steps of Confederation Building, I might have had a few knots in my stomach at that time, but I was definitely very proud. My heart was full, and I was on a mission, and I was determined, and nothing was going to stop me. So women and girls, I'm telling you all these stories for one reason. There is no mold to politics and politicians. It is your own convictions. It is where your strength is. Be you, be great, and be determined, and you will get where you need to go. Politics, I always said, has no college degree, it has no PhD, it has no block training. There are none of these things that comes attached to the criteria of politics. But what you do need is lots of energy, you need to be determined, and you need a lot of patience. All these changes that we've seen in the world has made it smaller, more faster pace, people are more demanding, so I will tell you, the highest priced commodity out there in politics today is patience. And I can say that after 25 years. But during that time, I saw some major transitions, and I want to tell you about a couple of them. Because when I left the employment outreach office where I worked and came into politics, we had a fax machine in the office, and we all lined up to use it. And my God, I thought it was the most marvelous thing I had ever seen. And now I think about it, and here I can load every file I have into an iCloud. I can scan, save, tweet, just like all the rest of you, send, share, copy. I don't even have to talk to you. I don't even have to meet you. You know, and it's unbelievable that you can do everything you need to do right now with a device in the palm of your hand. That has been fast-paced change in the digital world, and it's getting faster. Why can't we fast-track gender equality in politics at the same rate? Because we've yet to be able to do it. But we can do it, and groups like Equal Voice will allow us the opportunity to be able to do it. Let me tell you another story. Some people talked about the Trans-Labrador Highway. I came into politics as an independent member. Brian Tobin was courting me as the premier at the time. I liked Brian. He had a history in Labrador. He understood us. He had lots of personality. He was like me. You know, he could tell a story, make a speech, and, you know, he wasn't a bad guy. So I said to Brian Tobin, I'm after knocking on every door in Cartwright, Lancet-Clare in the month of February in my skidoo boots and my skidoo hat, and I had to go by snowmobile because we had no roads and I couldn't afford to fly. So I did every community by snowmobile. And you know what I told them? I'm going to build a road for them. So how are we going to build a road for them? But you know, and Seamus worked with him at the time, and Seamus remembers this very well. We go back a long way. And we did do that deal. In 1997, we flew into my home community of Mary's Harbour, and we announced the first sections of the Trans-Labrador Highway. That was 25 years ago. And of course, then you know I ran for the Liberals. But John Chrétien was the Prime Minister at the time. And back in 2015, when he came to speak at a fundraiser here in St. John's when I was running in federal politics, and he said, the most expensive acquisition the Liberal Party of Canada ever made was Yvonne Jones. She cost us $400,000 to build the Trans-Labrador Highway. And I think since that period of time, through every government in Newfoundland and Labrador and federally, they have contributed to the Trans-Labrador Highway. We've probably doubled that at least by now. And we didn't just build a highway, we paved it, and we are not done yet. Nunatsiavut wants to be connected by highway. Many other communities want to be connected, and this is 2022. It's time for all communities to be connected across Newfoundland and Labrador. When you make decisions in politics, and I'm sure the Premier goes through this every day, you always wonder how it's going to look 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road. And a lot of my friends from Ballet are here tonight, and in 2002, when we were in government, we signed a deal with Inco at the time for the Voisey's Bay project. And at that time, they didn't want to go underground. Today, they're going underground. At that time, they didn't want to build a smelter anywhere in Labrador and nowhere in Newfoundland. But guess what? We pushed and we pushed and we pushed, and they did build that smelter in Long Harbour. Fast forward to this month. This month, Vale signed the largest deal to provide the best grade low carbon produced nickel to the largest electric car manufacturer in North America, Tesla. That mine today, with direct employment and contractors, employs over 3,800 people in this province. So you always wonder, and then you see the success. It's just like in the last number of weeks in federal politics. We've had to deal with Bay de Nord. We've had to deal with the transition in oil and gas. And we're going to have lots more to have to deal with as a province and as a country. But we always have to work together to support what is in the best interest of Newfoundland and Labrador. And when I say doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, I really mean it. Because when it comes time to put your shoulder to the wheel, in this province, we put our shoulder to the wheel. In the time that I was in office, I know I had lots of firsts, but one of the proudest moments that I've had in my political career has been celebrating other women as they became the first. And while there has been many, I wish there were many more. I know I talked about a number of people already tonight. Some fantastic female colleagues like you've heard from already. Jo Marie Aylward, the first Minister of Finance. Kathy Dunderdale, the first Premier, female Premier. Anna Thistle, I think who's here tonight, was the first woman elected in her district, as was Charlene Johnson, the first female Minister of the Environment. Her Honor Judy Foote was the first federal cabinet minister in Newfoundland and Labrador and the first woman lieutenant governor. And there's been many other firsts. Many of you are in this room tonight. But still not enough. Just in recent years, just go back to the last couple of years, we saw the first Inuit woman from Newfoundland and Labrador appointed to the Newfoundland and Labrador Supreme Court, Justice Stacey Ryan from Labrador. We saw Dr. Vianne Timmins become the first woman president of Memorial University, an institution that have existed in this province since 1925. It took almost 100 years to get a woman to occupy that seat. And she is one of our own. She grew up in Labrador West, and she has the heart of this province in her job. And another first. I know there are many in the room, but Jennifer Williams. Jennifer is the first woman CEO of Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro, the leading public energy corporation in this province, and she's here with us tonight. The Energy Corporation was founded more than 50 years ago. So congratulations, Jennifer. And you're coming in at a time when energy transition is about to shape all future opportunities for the 21st century. Or women like my sister, Sherry Rumboldt, who's here tonight. Where are you too, Sherry? She served our country as a veteran and continued to work for the Department of National Defense after her retirement. She continues to break down barriers for women in military service, and she has been named one of the top women in cybersecurity in Canada. I'm still trying to figure out how to do a spreadsheet, but you know, it is okay. So there's been a lot of firsts, and I'm sure there will be many more. But like a lot of women, I've had tremendous support, not just from my mom, who's been absolute staple and a pillar of everything that I've done in my life, but also from my husband, Joseph, who's always been there to support me and to cheer me on. Even if I fell down, he said, get up and go again. And that's what it's all about. But I've had many tremendous men who've supported me along the way. And I want to say to the men that are out there tonight, lift those women up, because you can do it. I've had tremendous role models. I can't name them all. You heard some of them speak tonight. Many of them are in this room. I mean, I look at Philip Earle, he came in, he was my campaign manager in 1996. And my God, Philip, I don't think either one of us knew what we were doing. But anyway, but there's so many. And, you know, you were talking about Dwight Balls here. I want to say that Roger Grimes had the worst hair I ever seen of any premier. But I do want to say he was the only one smart enough to put me in his cabinet. So thank you, Roger Grimes. I want to give a tremendous shout out to Calvin Parsons. He couldn't be here tonight. Calvin and I, Dwight, you had a small opposition of 6. Well, I had 3. I was the leader of 3, and I was the third one. But I had Calvin Parsons, I had Roland Butler, and without them, I don't know how I would have got through. While I was going through chemotherapy, Calvin was doing all my work, getting my question period ready, having everything laid out for me when I walked in the door. You can't ever thank those people in your life who's been there through the roughest times, and he was one of them. And I didn't just have any job as the leader of the opposition of 3. I was facing probably the most popular premier this province has ever seen in their history in Danny Williams. And you know Danny, he had charisma. Danny was almost as good as me when he walked into a room. But I will tell you something. He was a tremendous support to me as a woman leader, and he was the premier of a big government and a big bench. But he didn't push me down, he lifted me up. And for that, I am so thankful. He couldn't be here tonight, but his sister Nancy is here. And I want to acknowledge the Williams Family Foundation for sponsoring this dinner. It really shows in Newfoundland and Labrador that when we put our heart into what we're doing, we never become adversaries, we always become friends. So you'll be happy to know I'm getting very close to the end. But there is a couple of more things that I do want to say. I started out talking about men and how you can lift women up, and I really feel that my success is as much attributed to men in my life as it has been to women. And I feel that I have been very fortunate to have the last 25 years in service to so many wonderful people in this province. I'm always ready to celebrate the milestones and the accomplishments that we make together. I'm fortunate today to serve in the federal government. I've been given tremendous opportunity as a parliamentary secretary for Indigenous Services, for internal trade, for intergovernmental affairs, and now I serve in natural resources and northern affairs. And it is in those portfolios that I've had the opportunity to move forward the agenda for the people that I represent. Creating opportunity in the North is creating opportunity for all Canadians. Understanding the Arctic and northern regions is really understanding the true resources and wealth of our country, and understanding and respecting the diverse cultures of our First People. So I continue to work hard for the people of Newfoundland and Labrador and the people of the North, but I don't do it alone. I have tremendous support in my colleagues, in my friends, in my constituents, in my communities, and in my staff. Many of them are here tonight. Stand up, please. And you talk about putting up with Yvonne Jones. One of those ladies, Miss Bonnie Hicks, have worked with me for 23 of the 25 years. I think she should be honored, not me. So I'm going to end on this, because I will always continue to rise up women in all corners of our country. I will continue to be inspired myself through the past and new generations of women thinkers and their male supporters. And I would like to think I not only inspire a new generation of women, but I solidify that girls could dream and that dreams could be a reality. And yes, women, you can take your seats.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. I don't know if you realize the full extent of how you've made a difference in people's lives. I always admire people who take their own personal stories that are very private, and sometimes you don't feel like sharing them, and it's hurtful or painful to talk about it. But your struggle with cancer and the fact that you allowed our cameras to record every aspect of your treatment has been talked about by so many women, and it gave them hope and it gave them courage to go further, and you are to be commended for doing that and talking about personal aspects of your life here this evening. Thank you very much. One more round of applause, please, for Yvonne Jones.